Hello, everyone. Mike here with you guys once again, and it is time for my very long-awaited E3 video. Now, I didn't do a pre E3 video this year because I just wasn't interested in E3 this year, to be honest. Like, I was not looking forward to it because there wasn't a lot of hype going in, and first of all, Sony wasn't there. And Sony has, when it comes to gameplay reveals, they knock it out of the park and beat everyone else every time. But that's despite the fact that their presentations, when they don't focus on gameplay, really suffer. But without them, there was a huge hole missing, and I knew that going in, and I was confirmed right. Now, I'll go into more details later on. But when I'm going to I'm going to talk about each of the presentations, whether it's a conference or a direct. I'm going to go through each of them one by one and tell you what I think, what I liked, what I didn't like, and I will announce a winner and loser. Now, I almost didn't. I almost didn't even have a winner. And because there simply wasn't a lot of exciting game reveals overall. And that's because we are at the year before the year that the next consoles come out. So everybody's mouth is practically shut over what they're really working on. So this was why Sony wasn't there, and they were right not to be there. And and you could tell that people are really keeping their mouth shut this year. And as a result, there was a lot of filler. Now, it did its job overall in terms of giving me some games to look forward to this year, but you could tell that people are being silent, and I will go into that topic as this video progresses. So let's start with the first presentation, and that is Google. Google kicked things off with the world's worst guide to launch consoles, Phil Harrison. Who's Phil Harrison? He's the guy that launched the PS3 and the Xbox One. So I don't know why he even gets hired at this point. But as far as Google Stadia is concerned, everybody was pretty much dumping on it. So once again, it seems like Phil Harrison has failed. But I gotta be honest, I didn't mind it so much. I thought it was okay. It made me think to myself, if I was living in DeLand still, I might consider trying out Stadia instead of getting a box. Because if we had the internet infrastructure and we didn't have data caps and we had net neutrality, that would easily replace having a box, having multiple boxes, and having a stack of games. It would be super convenient to just have a controller and a monitor that can play your games, and no more clutter, no more having to upgrade a generation, having to buy a new box every few years, because everything is done on their end. The problem is again, we don't have net neutrality, so the future of the internet is not certain, and that means the future of multiplayer games, digital downloads, all of that is very uncertain at this point. We don't see many people have data caps. That also affects the areas I just mentioned, and our internet infrastructure just isn't where it needs to be. My internet, where I'm at right now, is 3 download speed. 3. Not even 4, 3. According to my PS4. So Google Stadia is not going to be in my future right now. If I was living in DeLand, though, it might have been. But right where I'm at right now, I'm gonna need to get boxes, which I'm okay with. I'm fine with getting console boxes, but I'm starting to run out of room for them. So luckily, from what I hear, the consoles are going to be backwards compatible, so I won't have to keep the PS4 or the Xbox One once the next systems come out. But my advice to Google and to these companies that are trying to push the digital online future: fight to restore net neutrality. Right now, the ISPs are standing in your way. They're standing in the way of your investments, and you need to fight back against it. Okay? I'm surprised there's not more talk amongst these corporations publicly to restore net neutrality. because they have everything to gain from it. Google Stadia has everything to gain from net neutrality, because it's going to allow more people to use that platform. So yeah, start saying something. Microsoft, Google, start speaking up for us internet users. Start speaking up for us gamers. Start speaking up for net neutrality, because the ISPs are going to hinder your investments. Do you hear that? The ISPs and the Trump administration and the FCC, they are standing in the way of your investment. So if you really want this online future of game streaming, we gotta have net neutrality. This is why you need to pay attention to politics, because it does affect gaming. It does affect your everyday life. Alright, I'm about to go on a political rant here, so I'm going to stop there. So there's my thoughts on the Stadia presentation. Well, I actually didn't think it was bad. It was brief, got to the point, gave me the information I needed to know. You could argue about the prices being too much. I'm not going to disagree with that. But it got me thinking, what if I was still in the land? And that's a plus. So Phil Harrison, I don't think blew it here for me. It seems that way for everybody else, but not for me. But because of where I'm at now, Google Stadia is just not going to be an option for me, and I'm okay with that. All right, the next E3 events. I'm having a hard time thinking about this now. And I'm going to skip EA because they did not do a conference or a presentation. They just did a treehouse type thing that's lasted for hours. So the only time I'm really going to just talk about with EA is Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. It's obvious now from seeing the gameplay of that why they canceled Amy Hennig's project, because from what I understand, they were basically making the same game, or a game that was similar, because Amy Hennig makes single player third person games, and Respawn apparently was doing the same thing. Now I heard they're going to do open world, but I guess they just didn't have I don't know why they didn't follow through with that, the whole open world thing, but when you look at what Amy Hennig does and what Respawn's doing, it's obvious they had to pick one, and they went with Respawn's idea. Now, what does it look like to me? It looks very promising. I am interested. My concern, though, is you notice there's obviously a level up system that we saw, because you said if you reached a certain rank or level or whatever while the game was playing. So as a result, I was thinking, okay, this is EA. They might make the grinding needlessly slow to get you to buy microtransactions. There's no confirmation on that, but take it with a grain of salt. Just keep that in mind before you get too excited about this game. But other than that, the gameplay looks pretty awesome. I like the action moves. It looks like there could be a good story here as well. I don't know. But I am interested in Jedi Fallen Order as of right now. Otherwise, I've got nothing more to say about EA. Next up, who is next? I think it's Microsoft. I'm afraid I might be skipping people, but I really don't want to. Microsoft really dropped the ball. Sony was nowhere to be found. This was Microsoft's chance to talk about in detail the next-gen console. And that would allow them to talk about all the amazing games that they are working on in greater detail. And they didn't. It was mostly what they do a lot of times during E3. Non-gameplay showing trailers and teasers. Constantly. Very forgettable. One after the other. A few highlights. Keanu Reeves showing up was awesome. I like that the Cyberpunk 2077 is not that far off. It's like early next year, which isn't too far off for that game. Gears 5 is coming out this year. And if you know how Gears 4 ended, it ended on a very interesting cliffhanger, so I'm interested in that. But even the way they presented Gears 5 was not interesting at all. In fact, I think last year's, or previous year's showing of Gears 5 was much more interesting. They showed a lot more gameplay. But overall, Microsoft had E3 in their hands and dropped it so that they can wait another year before getting into detail about the Scarlett. All they did was they pulled an Xbox Scorpio. a Project Scorpio scenario. They did exactly the same thing. Wait till next year. That's what they told us. If that's what you're going to do, Microsoft, don't even bother showing up. You really blew it. You dropped the ball. All you had to do was you're a console maker. You are allowed to. You have complete freedom to show off what you have. You're not like a third-party developer that's bound to the standards and schedules of someone else. You set the standards and the rules at Microsoft. You had every opportunity to really knock it off the park with a full reveal of games and your next console. Even if you still gotta wait for next year to bring it out, that's fine. But you could have completely had the narrative, and you didn't do it. So I was really disappointed. Thumbs down on overall, despite the few highlights with Keanu Reeves and a few other highlights I can't think of at the top of my head right now. But yeah, that's Microsoft. You blew it. Next came Bethesda, and despite the fact that people were complaining about it, I didn't think the conference was as bad as Bethesda as everyone says. It wasn't a great conference, but they did have some cool things to show. Even though there were stuff we already knew, it was still cool to watch it. Like, seeing more of Doom Eternal was pretty awesome. I liked the first Doom. There are some things about Fallout 76 that they showed that I liked. Like, NPCs and quests. And it looks like that game has the potential to be better than it's been since launch. So I'm hoping they could turn things around for Fallout 76. One thing I didn't like, though, Battle Royales. I'm sick to death of them. I'm sick to death of Battle Royales. And speaking of sick to death, you know what else I'm sick of that Microsoft had? Zombies. I'm tired of zombies. They've been overexposed for 10 years almost now. I'm tired of zombies, and I'm tired of Battle Royales. Blades is coming for free to the Switch. I think that's pretty cool. And despite the fact that they did show some mobile games, they didn't spend too much time on them, and so I didn't mind. It wasn't taking up too much time at the conference. So Bethesda had a well-paced conference, but again, because, and this is going to be a problem throughout E3, there's just not, everybody has their hands tied until next gen can be revealed. So because of that hindered a lot of E3, and that's why Sony didn't show up. Okay, so that's Bethesda. Overall, decently paced, but you could tell that they're biting their tongue still, like everyone else. Let's see. Next is Devolver Digital. And the thing about Devolver Digital is it's obviously a spoof. It's a spoof series that spoofs E3. I didn't even know that they were a real company until I found out later on. But I don't know if the games they show are part of the spoof, or if they're actual games. But it is entertaining to watch, and it wasn't too long. They basically spoofed a direct this year, and I enjoyed it. But again, I don't really consider them in the competition because, again, they're a spoof. They're not really, a real conference or a real presentation. Even though they are a real development studio. Alright, now we're going to the VR. VR had a presentation this year, and despite some really cool highlights, most of the highlights were games I wanted to come to Quest, and there's this really cool Blade Runner looking game, but I don't think it's coming to PSVR or the Quest. I think it's coming to PC, so I won't be able to play it, which sucks, because I want to play that. But there was a lot of medieval stuff that I think was unnecessary, because when you have Skyrim, you really don't need another medieval game, and you have Skyrim in VR. That's all you need for a medieval. That's really all you need. Everything else is like an indie, tiny piece of it, Also, First Contact is putting out a game for the Quest. I would be excited about that if Firewall wasn't broken. If I can't trust you with my PSVR, why should I trust you with my Quest? Fix Firewall, and then I'll be thrilled to play your next game on Quest. Okay, so those are my thoughts on the VR one. Next up is PC. PC is pretty much set its pace and set what it wants to be by now. It pretty much knows what it wants to be. And unfortunately, there was a lot of filler. There was a couple of interesting points. Shenmue 3 was shown, which was awesome. But overall, didn't really impress me too much. Okay, next up is Ubisoft. Ubisoft didn't feel as eclectic as before, but I think that's a plus. I felt like there was more of a tonal consistency, and I felt it did better without Aisha Tyler. I really do. And but again, like with everyone else, you could tell that they're biting their tongue. And like the coolest reveal for me was the Watch Dogs game, which had some really interesting surprises in and of itself. But we knew Watch Dogs 3 was coming out. Watch Dogs Legion now. But still, it looks interesting, so I'm curious to see how that game turns out, you know. I think the mechanic of being able to recruit everyone in the city is, wow, that's interesting. I don't know if they can pull that off well, but we'll see. So overall, decent conference, but again, yeah. Next up is the Indie Showcase, which had a few interesting games and some filler. I thought Craig Miller and Tim Geddes did a good job with the humor of it. Well put together presentation. And but if you like indie games, I think this is one of the better ones. Next up is Square Enix, and they started off strong. They pretty much showed their biggest game, at least for now, at the beginning, when I was worried they were going to blow their load completely, and they kind of did. But we finally got to see the combat for Final Fantasy VII Remake, and it is a combination of real-time and turn-based. They managed to combine them both in a very interesting way. Looks really awesome. Looking forward to this one. The rest of the conference was basically a weeboo's dream. So if you're into JRPGs, they had a lot of that. Mostly, there was a few other things, but mostly JRPGs. So if that's your thing, I think it was great. But if you're not into that, it's not going to be much for you. They ended with Avengers, which looks promising, but I wish they showed gameplay, especially because they're going to have gameplay at the conference, at the event itself. If they had gameplay, I think that would have been a much stronger ending. Okay, so that's Square Enix. Finally, we get to Nintendo. And Nintendo, I think, was the best, because Nintendo, their current systems, they're not coming up with a successor to the Switch yet. If anything, it's just going to be a more powerful Switch, because the Switch is doing really well right now. But they showed a lot of really good games. We're going to get a sequel direct to Breath of the Wild. The Pokemon game looks good. It has a bunny on it. And also, the presentation didn't look kiddie. It didn't. It looked like a general audience presentation, which is unusual for Nintendo, especially the past few years. But man, surprises that they show. Now, we heard of rumors of the Witcher 3 coming out for Switch, but I didn't think it was going to happen, because I don't think The Witcher 3 can run on Switch. But it's coming. I'm like, there's no way they can do this. So we'll see what happens on that. But there was a little clip that blew me away, and that was Alien Isolation on Switch. Heck yeah. Now I just wish it would come to PSVR. But Nintendo had a huge advantage over everyone else because their mouths aren't tied down. Because they don't have like a successor coming up for a while. But everyone else, unfortunately, has their mouths tied. Their mouths sewn shut. Because what they're really working on and what they're really interested in is not going to be able to be talked about until the next consoles come out. Okay. So, the winner for me, and this is just my opinion, the winner of E3 is Nintendo. And the loser is Microsoft. Not because their conference was worse than everybody else's, but because they had the opportunity to blow us out of the water. They were in a position where they could talk about next gen where everyone else can't. And they didn't do it. So that is why they lost to me. Winner Nintendo, loser Microsoft. And that's all I got to say for E3 2019, and I'll see you next time.